Hi friends! Welcome to my channel. My name's Laura and this is Purely Inspired Living. Hi! If you are brand new here, welcome. If you have been here before, welcome back. I'm so glad that you're here to check out how we can use astrology for relationships. So, how to use astrology for relationships. It's kind of a lot. There's a lot that we can use astrology for in self-development and understanding our soul growth and soul progress, interacting with others, and understanding others better. So that's what we're talking about with relationships. So a relationship is any kind of connection between two individuals. So that can be, relationships with family. It can be relationships with your children. It can be relationships with coworkers or business partners. And it can mean significant others or, romantic partners and such. So there are all kinds of relationships that we can use astrology for. So depending on what relationship you're looking into right now kind of determines how you're going to approach this. There are a couple of different ways in which you can go about discovering if people are compatible or what. Since we have been focusing on basic astrology, so astrology just for the brand new beginner, like we understand that there is zodiac and things, but don't really know how to really understand it. Like we're starting at the basics, okay? So there is a compatibility calculator that you could use in which it takes the birth information of two different people and it smushes them together. We're not going to look at that one today because that one is it's more for those that are a little bit more advanced. If you are to that like intermediate level or you feel really comfortable looking at astrology and the natal charts, then you can go ahead and do that. But for the purpose of this, we are going to look at just two individual charts and talk about how we can use that to better understand our compatibility as two individuals interacting with one another, and where we look at or how we use the celestial bodies to kind of interpret information. Okay, so this is going to be, again, another basic astrology lesson. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into some charts. Okay, so we have two different charts here, all right? This is how we are going to approach this. I've used astro-seek.com. That's the one that I normally go with. And I've opened up two different screens and I've put in partner A's natal information, birth information, and partner B's birth information in a separate screen. And then I've just put them side by side so we can look at them that way. So before we really start looking at these charts, let's talk about more about relationships in general, okay? So again, I mentioned there are all different types of relationships we can have with people. What makes a good and healthy relationship will be, how your personalities go together, what kind of communication styles you guys have. So communication is key in any relationship, right? So understanding communication is really helpful. Knowing what kind of temperament someone has, how empathetic they are, how tolerant they are of others, understanding their approach and their emotional needs and state is one way that we can understand relationships and determine how they're going to work together. So those are some different things that need to be thought of when we're looking into relationships in general. And I also want to say, if you're here because you feel lost in your relationship, I want you to take a beat, just take a pause, take a breath, and really reflect on how comfortable you are knowing yourself. If you are in a place in your life where you just feel a little lost, first of all, that is totally okay. We've all been there. There are times that we've been there, we've gotten through it, and then we get there again. And, because life is a cycle, we don't work linearly, even though, we'd like to. So if that's you, that is 100% okay. What I might encourage you to do, instead of trying to figure out two different people, first, really dig into yourself. Figure out who you are. Figure out what your big three are, and how you see those play out in your everyday life. Look at where you can start finding balance in your own life. And by working on yourself, you might discover more about your partner along the way just because you know yourself better. So I just wanted to throw that out there before we really dig into this. But by knowing yourself, so let's say you're getting to where you know yourself, you're working on yourself, you're doing shadow work or whatever it is, and you really want to understand your relationship with somebody else in a deeper way, whether that's a significant other or a parent, whatever relationship we're talking about, wherever you want to dig into that relationship. This is where I would recommend you start if you are pretty new to astrology. If you're more advanced, then this video might not be for you. But I do plan on doing another video in a week or two where we look at a more advanced charting system and talk about using astrology for relationships in a deeper way for a more advanced person, or somebody that's ready to step into just a deeper level of astrology. And don't think I'm talking down to you if you're not ready for that, because believe me, I don't even feel like I'm ready for that sometimes until I'm doing it, and then I'm like, okay, I guess I do understand it a little bit. But really, I've found, no matter what we're talking about, having a very, very strong foundation in the basics is more than enough information to get you where you want to go. So that's where we're starting. So we're starting at bare bones here. So getting back to it, you know yourself, you've been doing your own intentional work, discovering who you are, your wants and needs, and all of that. So now you're ready to look at yourself and someone else and how to kind of understand one another better. First, we're going to talk about the big three, obviously. The big three is that is the basis of all things in astrology for a person. Looking at the sun sign, the moon sign, and the rising sign or the ascension line. If you are using this and you don't know the rising sign of either yourself or someone else, don't sweat it. Knowing the sun sign is more than enough to get you the sun sign, and most likely the moon sign, and then your celestial bodies. The moon and the rising change the quickest. So everything else is going to be pretty stable. If you've got a date, their birth date in the year, that's going to give you more than enough information to get started with. So if you don't know the houses because you don't know the rising sign, don't sweat it. I've got you covered. Okay, well, you will step away from here having a firmer understanding of what to look for and how to kind of interpret the information. Okay, so we're going to talk about the big three. So let's talk about the sun and rising sign. So those two kind of go together, because the sun and the rising sign come together to form the real basis of personality. Okay, so like the general personality, who you are. So the sun sign and the rising sign are going to show us a basis of personality, like I said, but they're also going to tell us temperament. So they're going to tell us the temperament of ourselves, and if we're looking at somebody else's chart, it's going to tell us the temperament of the other person. So if you know anything about developmental psychology, or if you don't, you're getting ready to. One of the coolest things is when a baby is born, an infant has what we call a temperament. And, you know, when you compare, an adult person to who they were as a newborn, they're totally different, right? They've developed personality, they've developed skills and traits and stuff where they don't have when they're newborn. However, what they do have that stays consistent across the lifespan is their temperament. So an easy-tempered baby, a baby that has an easygoing temperament, will be an adult that has a personality that is pretty well even-keeled, okay? They're not overly difficult to work with. They're just pretty general, okay? It's pretty baseline. It's not like extreme or anything. So that temperament sticks with that person. So even though they develop personality into like a real personality, that temperament stays true throughout the lifespan, which is just so fascinating to me. So that sun sign and the rising sign will really tell you the temperament. And again, if you don't know rising, that is okay. The sun sign is going to tell you the most vital parts about the other person. The moon. So the moon shows us our instincts. It shows us our intuition. It talks about our reactions and our responses to the world. So a person's moon sign, both yours, person, and whoever you're looking for, their moon sign is going to tell you how they respond to others. Okay? I'm going to go through a basis of the celestial bodies, and then in these charts, I'm going to show you what we're looking at. So your moon says how they respond to others. Your Mercury represents intellect, ideas, thoughts, and communication. So a person's Mercury sign is going to be how they communicate with others, how they express themselves. All right, so there we're looking at communication style and how they express themselves, how easy or difficult it is to express themselves, things like that. You'll find that in Mercury. Venus, obviously we know Venus, the goddess of love and beauty. So Venus represents love and affection, and also plays a part in our possessions, okay, and how we view our possessions. Actually, mostly it's how we view our possessions. So in terms of relationships, you will find, how someone expresses feelings of love, how they express, express affection, because that's a huge part in relationships. And again, it doesn't have to be romantic to have love and affection. My very dear friends, I love them a lot, and I express affection towards them in a non-romantic way, right? Like, you know what I mean. So we find our Venus tells us how we express that. And then looking at someone else's chart, it's how they express it and how they best receive love, how it's easiest for them to receive love. Mars indicates all of our physical energy. Our motivation is in Mars. Our physical expression is in Mars. So in a romantic relationship, we're talking about physical expressions of love can be found with our Mars, but even if it's not a romantic relationship, it's still that physical manifestation of the relationship. And it also, like I said, is where we find our motivation. So if we're talking about business partners, that would be really important because probably should have like similar motivations. Jupiter represents expansion. So Jupiter, looking at another person's Jupiter will help, especially when you put them together, when you understand them together, you start to see where someone else might help expand your own horizons or how you would expand someone else's horizons. So understanding your Jupiter shows where you expand, okay? And then your expansions, whether you're talking about a friendship or whatever, that's the expansion you're gonna bring to the table. So then looking at someone else's, that's how they would expand your own horizons in that area. And so if they work together or not, like, again, we're not going to get into looking at them together, but when you look at somebody else's Jupiter, that expansion, just understanding where Jupiter is, what sign it's in, kind of tells you how expansion happens. Okay. Saturn is known for discipline. It's known for limitations. It's known for structure. So Saturn, in looking at relationships, is going to show how someone can bring structure into your life, where they have strong structure, where their structure is. So understanding their discipline style, understanding their structure style, helps you understand like some of their pet peeves, maybe. Saturn would be really good. Saturn's a really strong indicator if it makes any kind of aspect with the big three. So what I mean by that is if Saturn is the same as your sun sign, that's going to be a big deal. If their Saturn is at the same sign as their moon sign, that's going to have a big impact on them, okay? So that's what I'm talking about. It would be really strong if it makes a connection like that. We do have Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, and they have their own skills and sets that they bring to the table. However, those are generational, and unless they are connected to personal planets, kind of like with Saturn, like what I was talking about, if they're making any kind of aspect with a sun, moon, or rising sign, or if they're, conjunct with a Mercury or Venus, like if they're doing anything like that, then they're a big deal. Otherwise, they don't really play a huge part because, like I said, they're for the generation. So large groups of people are going to have the same planet in the same sign. So as long as you were born around the same time that someone else has been born, it's not going to be that impactful because it's going to be the same as you. If they are different, that can tell you kind of the overall environment that they were growing up in, and that can give you insight on some like cultural things going on at the time that can affect them. But as far as it being personal to their day-to-day life, those outer three planets aren't as big of a deal when we're talking about relationships. Okay. So those are what we're talking about. Let's get into the charts a little bit before we move on. So I want to point this. So this is one chart, and this is somebody else's chart, right? So I have two separate charts pulled up. I've used astro-seek.com. I just did a natal chart. So I pulled up a natal chart. I typed in the information, and then I generated this. I opened up a separate tab, pulled up astro-seek, did a birth chart, put in all the birth information, and so now I have them side by side. So I'm looking at it like this, for one, because it's not too much going on at the same time. I can look at one and understand one, and then I can go to the other and understand the other without trying to enmesh everything too much. So over here on this one, we see the sun, we see the moon, and we see the rising sign. Okay, sun, moon, rising. Sun, moon, rising. Now we go over to the other chart. We find our sun here, we find our moon down here, and then our rising sign. All right. I do want to make note of the sun sign a little bit. Something we haven't really talked about is a daytime chart versus a nighttime chart. And over here, we see the sun is in the upper hemisphere, right? It's in the upper half, and that means it's a daytime chart. So this person, a lot of their energy is going to be exerted in the outside world, okay? So a daytime chart is external, whereas this person over here, their sun is in the bottom hemisphere. So they are a nighttime chart. So a lot of their energy is going to be exerted on the inside. All right, so a daytime chart, over the course of the lifetime, we're going to see a lot of themes about expanding outward. And in a nighttime chart, a lot of lifetime themes is going to be about going inside. All right, so knowing that information can help you determine what the needs of the person are going to be over the course of the life. All right, I mean, and that's a general idea, but it does give you an idea of what kind of life expressions we're going to be seeing, like where some soul growth, where we're going to see soul growth at, whether that be out in the outside or just more personal on the inside and just like personal development. If we look, so the last one that we did was talking about the elements. So if that's where you are, then that's awesome. So we see the sun over here is in Virgo, being an earth element. The sun in this person's chart is in Pisces, is a water element. So the sun, like I said, tells you temperament. That looking at the elements will tell you an earth energy is going to be very grounded, and a water energy is going to be very emotional. Okay, not like emotional like that, but just emotions are going to play a big part of that person. And then we have our rising sign. And we've talked about rising sign before. Rising's like how we approach life. So when we have needs that need to be met, if we're in a turbulent situation and we first have to like get centered, the place we start is looking at our rising sign, and those needs have to be met first. Then we can move on to doing any grounding practices or anything. So this person 2 has a Libra rising. Person 1 has a Scorpio rising. Okay, so those are our sun and rising signs. Again, if you do not know the rising sign, just knowing the sun sign is enough. It's going to tell you enough about the core person, and the core of their needs are going to be found in their sun sign. All right, let's move on to the moon. So the moon sign in person 1 is down here in Capricorn. In person 2, the moon sign is going to be in Aquarius. So the emotional needs of person 1 down here in Capricorn. First of all, the moon is in detriment in Capricorn. Oh, excuse me. What that means is it's in the opposite sign that it rules. So it's in detriment. And that means that it's just harder for those ideas to be expressed. Meaning, person 1 really has to work at balancing their emotions. They really have to work to really express their emotional needs and understand their emotional needs. Person 2 over here in Aquarius, Aquarius energy is it's an air energy, so it's very thoughtful energy. So those emotional needs and emotional expressions are going to be done in thought. Okay. Then we move on to Mercury. Mercury in person 1's charts here in Virgo. Mercury rules Virgo, so this energy is just naturally very free flowing. It's a very strong energy. It rules Virgo, so therefore it is just naturally strong. So this person has strong communication skills, strong thoughts. Like it's easy for them for that Mercury to be expressed. Over here, Mercury in Aquarius. Now that is, Mercury is an air sign, but it does not rule Mercury, or Mercury does not rule Aquarius. And they're both higher thought. They're both just thought. So verbal expression might be difficult. Like getting it from the head thoughts out into the world might be a challenge with this person. So that's what these Mercuries, just a basis, what Mercury could mean. We're not going to talk about all of them, but we'll talk about Venus next. We see Venus here in Cancer of person 1, and over here we see Venus in Taurus for person 2. And again, Venus being how we express love, how we express affection, and how we view our possessions. So I'll note that Venus in person 2 being in Taurus, Venus rules Taurus. It's at home in Taurus. So this is going to be a very strong expression. Okay, Venus is going to be very easy to express here. So it's going to be very easy for them to express their affection and their love. Whereas person 2, Venus being in Cancer, it might be a bit more challenging just because it's not in its home sign. So that's what we're going to say about that. We're going to talk about the houses a little bit. So when we look at the houses, when we're talking about relationships, the first place to look at in the housing systems, if you're just looking at houses, would be the 7th house. The 7th house is our realm of relationships, okay? It's how we approach our relationships with others, especially the relationships that we choose to have. That resides here in the 7th house. So in person 1, the 7th house is empty. That doesn't mean anything bad, but it does mean that there's not a lot of extra energy there. So there is it's not a huge focus. There's not a lot of energy that comes out in that person naturally. Now, whenever planets and moons transit that, then that house is activated and there's energy there. But natally, it's just not a huge source of energy. Whereas the person 2 over here, we have Jupiter in the 7th house. So that Jupiter, that house of or not house of expression, but that celestial body, that character of expression, of expansion, is found here in the 7th house. So this person, their horizons are going to be expanded through the relationships they have with others. That's what that Jupiter means. We have Jupiter in Taurus over here. Again, Taurus being earth energy, very grounded. So this is going to be a very grounded energy. Okay, so that's just a basic thing for the house systems and how you can look at the houses and see how that plays a part in that person's life. The next one is going to be the 5th house. Okay, so the 5th house in person 1 is down here in Pisces. The 5th house over here is going to actually be, we're going to look to Aquarius for the 5th house over here. The 5th house is where love affairs are. It's where passions and risk-taking and any relationship that we have with another, especially that we choose to have, is a risk, right? Like, it's different than with our families because our families, we're stuck with them. That's just how it is. When we choose to have a relationship with another person, there's risk, we become vulnerable. We put, even in the form of like business partners, you're taking a risk with them. The 5th house is how people take risks. And down here we see person 1, the North Node in retrograde is here. So that tells me that person 1 their soul growth, their soul purpose kind of in this life is to create some kind of spiritual relationship, okay? Down here we see Mercury in the 5th house in Aquarius. And so that, communication, we see that creation happens through that communication, all right? So when we talk about creation, if we're talking about romantic partners, spouses, this also could be where we find children, because again, creation. But it doesn't have to be that. Anybody can create anything. It doesn't necessarily have to mean the creation of life. So even if you have a spouse and you're looking in this chart, and you're not planning on having children, that doesn't mean children. This is just anything that you could possibly be birthing into the world, and then how their approach to that would be is in that house. If you're looking into business partners or like a marital relationship, anywhere where you're sharing finances, you're going to want to look to the 2nd house and the 8th house. So over here, the 2nd house in Sagittarius, the 8th house in technically Taurus. In partner 2, we have a 2nd house in Scorpio and the 8th house in Taurus. So you just noted that both 8th houses actually are Taurus. So that means those 8th house themes are going to be the same. They're going to be the same type. They're going to be very Taurus themes. And the 2nd house is where we talk about resources and personal resources. So we think about how we get our money, our jobs, how we obtain resources and in the form of money. In the short term, we're talking about the 2nd house. In the long term, we're talking about 8th house. So long-term finances, loans, you'll often hear talk about there could be signs of, if you're going to inherit. So that is where we find long-term financial themes that resides in the 8th house. If we were in specifically a business partnership, you guys would be interested here in the MC, because the 10th house, the MC and the 10th house talk about where our ambitions are and where our future goals, where our aspirations are, falls in the 10th house. So that tells you a lot about how business, how ambitious they are in certain areas. If we were talking about relationships, like a romantic partnership, we could also talk about the 4th house, because the 4th house is our home. It's where we feel at home, is in the 4th house. So the 4th house down here in Aquarius, 4th house down here in Capricorn, that tells you about how the individuals look at home, and where they feel at home. If you can understand the zodiac signs and what they individually bring to the table, Aquarius, what that individually brings to the table, then you can go deeper. If you're just at the elements, like I understand that Aquarius is an air element and Pisces is a water element, you can understand a lot of information just by knowing those. If we look down here in partner 2, we have Mars in Capricorn. So Mars is in the sign of Capricorn, which is an earth sign. So Capricorn is very earth-based. We talked about on the last episode. I'll link that up there. But Capricorn being earth and a cardinal energy. So Mars, it's going to be very earth-based focus. It's going to be very practical. It'll be kind of analytical. It'll be very grounded. and it's going to have energy of let's just get going. It's going to have a very push forward type motivation. Because remember, we're talking about cardinal, fixed, or mutable. Mutable being flexible, fixed being very like foundational, and cardinal being a very get up and go kind of energy. So this Mars, it's going to be grounded and it's going to get down to business. So the motivation that we're going to find here is very grounded and go for it type of energy. And then if we go into the house system, it is going to be in the house of home. So it's going to be very grounded and go type of energy in home life. So domestic ideas are going to be I've got sidetracked because I know this person that makes total sense. This person gets stuff done at home, and actually to the point where the person doesn't really stop. But again, because it has that strong like push energy from that cardinal Capricorn sign. Now, if you know more about Capricorn and you know that it is ambitious, it is the sea goat. So it has this huge range of motion where it starts and it climbs and makes its way to the top. It's so ambitious and it's so go for it energy. You can go deeper, but as long as you know the element and the quality of that element or the quality of that sign, you are going to have all kinds of information on how to read and interpret these celestial bodies. Okay, I think that's about all that I have for this. When we're basic, we look at them individually and kind of take notes. Okay, this person is, so person one over here is a Scorpio rising. I know that their approach is going to be intense. Their approach is going to be very guarded, but there's going to be deep emotional depth there. There is going to be deep instinct and deep psychic connections, because we see psychic connections there. Deep empathy, deep intuition. Over here, the person two, a rising sign in Libra, they're going to strive. Their approach is going to be balance and harmony. So that could mean that their approach is to let things go that would really bother them inside for the sake of harmony. So maybe this person is a people pleaser, but one of their needs is to be in balance. So their approach, so if they're in a situation that they're upset, their first need to be met is to balance out. So I would recommend this person practice breathing when they are like emotionally in an emotional upheaval or whatever. I would recommend some deep breathing, just practice some breath exercises so they can find balance. And then after those needs are met, then they can go and approach whatever the situation is. And how these two people interact together, it's really interesting because they're side by side. So, Libra and then Scorpio. Usually those signs in the zodiac, you've got one sign and then the sign that comes right after it, they're usually opposites. They're usually not the same sign at all and are in conflict. Like they seem to be opposites. So that can cause a bit of tension. But I do find that because there's so much empathy here and because this person's approach is balance, that they can work together and one can provide balance while the other provides insight, if that makes sense. So that approach, even though it's different, can be very harmonious with one another because of what they can bring to the table. A couple of notes before we really wrap up. I'm sure you have heard, I'm going to take a sip of this coffee. I'm sure that you've heard like an old, 17 magazine and like different magazines and stuff where they're like, ooh, is your partner your soulmate based off zodiac or whatever it is. A lot of those would say, hey, if you're this sun sign, you should date this person in this sun sign because they go together. And there is some truth to that. The sun is our core personality, and some personality types go together better than others. However, you know that you are not just one part. You're a whole constellation, right, of components. So just because your sun signs might not naturally go together doesn't mean that the relationship is not going to be a smooth one. There might be struggles, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be a bad relationship. It just means that there might be things that you guys have to work on together. So don't let that idea dissuade you from a relationship just because you feel like you would clash. There are a couple of signs that do suggest a harmony. They do suggest that they work easier together. The first one is going to be opposite sun or sun opposite the rising. So that would be like, so this person's sun is in Virgo. So if the other person's rising was Pisces, that they would go together very well. It would just be an easier relationship. The other one that signifies something really good would be sun opposite sun. So sun in Virgo here and sun in Pisces over here, which we do see. So these people would balance each other. So you've got a sun in Virgo, you've got a sun in Pisces, and they are going to bring a balance. So in astrology, we use astrology to help our lives, not because it tells us what to do or what's going to happen, but it shows us where things naturally flow and where things naturally have struggle, where we can find balance. And so when a person's sun is opposite another person's sun, or a person's sun is opposite the other person's rising sign, can show that they bring balance to the table. When they're combined, there's balance. The chart, if they were combined, would be balanced. One thing where it does signify some issues would be if they have the same sun sign. Again, I'm not dissuading you. I'm not saying that this is a bad relationship if there are two people with the same type of sun. Like, you guys have very similar personalities, which can be really helpful. It means you probably have similar interests. You probably have similar approaches. Like, you're very similar. But in the same token, I mean, you've heard of too much of a good thing. It could be that you guys feel too much alike and there's not enough difference, not enough difference. So just know that could indicate some staleness because you're not too similar, because that sounds like it's bad. But because of there's so much similarity, it can feel stale in a type of in a relationship, of like a romantic type of relationship. So just know that. And again, that's one sign. We are like I said, a whole constellation of different components. So one is never going to be the whole picture. So when we're just starting out and we were digging into looking at astrology and understanding relationships, this is a great place to understand our partner's motivations, a place to understand our partner's approaches, understand their emotional needs, okay? Understanding how they express themselves. These are great ways for us to be intentional with our relationships, and putting doing research on how we can better understand our partner. so we can show them the love and affection the way they most easily receive it based on their Venus sign. And it could be different than ours. We see the Venus over here in Cancer, and we see Venus over here in Taurus. Those are different. So they express love and affection differently, meaning they receive it most easily in that way. Not that they can't receive it in other ways, but it's going to mean the most to them if they can receive love in that sign, in that way. So person 1, Venus being in Cancer. Cancer, again, is a cardinal energy, and it's a water element. So it's emotional, and it's go for it energy. So they receive love easiest when it's emotional and it's just brought to them. They don't have to wait for it. They don't have to ask for it. But when it is brought to them in that deep emotional connection. Whereas person 2, the way that they would receive love the easiest would be, it's a Taurus, so an earth sign, and it is a fixed sign. So it's foundational. It is stable. So the way they most easily receive affection is stable and tangible and physical. It's just, again, knowing these two people, this makes so much sense. And I'm just now looking at it and digging into it. I'm like, oh, wow, this makes so much sense. And I'm not saying these words because I know them. When I'm saying that this Venus in Taurus, it's stable, foundational, it receives it in a very physical, stable way. It's kind of mind-blowing because I should have known this already, but I am just now kind of really putting it in those words by looking at these charts and really understanding that. The next video I'm going to do on relationships will be showing you these two charts in a compatibility chart. So they will not be separated, they'll be combined. There we will be able to see the aspects that are being made here. We'll talk all about that in that video. So if you're ready for a more advanced understanding of looking at astrology for relationships, check that video out. Go ahead and subscribe so you can get that, so you'll see that right when it comes out. So that's pretty much it for today. So if you liked this, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Like I said, subscribe. For one, if you're ready to go deeper, or two, you just are really into learning astrology and how to practically apply this. Drop comments below, any questions you have about this. I hope it made sense, but if I didn't cover anything, or you have some more questions or want some clarification, go ahead and drop a comment. Or if you have a question about, hey, what does this person's Mars sign mean? Or what does my Mars sign mean? So like my Mars is in Aries, what does that mean? Drop those questions in the comments below, and we can go ahead and start talking about that. And if there's enough interest, I might start doing individual videos or something based off of, what Mars looks like in every sign and in every house or something like that. But anyways, drop anything in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me through this. I hope you found this helpful. I love sharing this time with you. And until next time, friend, I hope you stay inspired.